how we go about creating an array list in Java. In our previous class, we would have looked at how to create an array, and we realized that array comes with certain limitations. One of which is that the array size is fixed. So once the array has been defined, you can only store elements in it, a certain amount of elements in it, based on the size that you would have specified upon creation. So for example, if we were to define an array, for example, members of type string, equal to new string. All right, so let's say this array is designed to store 3 members. So let's say we probably start off a club and we started off with 3 members, and for some strange reason, the program is designed to store 3 members. If the club would have grown, the array would not allow us to actually increase in size. We would not be able to store more than 3 members for the lifetime of the program. So, all right. So if we try to store, and by the way, remember the index of the array would start from 0. So the last index in this array member would be 2. So it's 0, 1, 2. So if we try to say something like member index, say index 3, it should be the 4th one, because the first one would be 0, then 1, 2. All right. So if we try to access the 4th one, we would not be allowed to do so. So if we try to say that the 4th member is Kemar, it would not allow us to do so because we would be going out of bound. All right. So if we should run this, we would realize that we are out of bound because this is size 3 because it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's run this and we will see what happens. So if we run this, let me make sure. Okay, this one has a mean. All right, so we notice that we have an error. All right, so we get a runtime error. That's an out of bound exception. That's because we're trying to access an index out of the range of the array. All right. So to work around this, we have a better option. So we could create an array list. An array list is so designed to store just about any amount of items. All right, so the array list is not restricted to a certain size. So the array list can grow dynamically. So it therefore means that whenever we are creating the array list, there's no need to specify or to know beforehand how many elements can we want to store, because the list grows dynamically. All right, so if we are going to set up an array list, we would start off with the keyword array list. All right, and this would be followed by the type of values that we want to store in the array list. So if we want to store some strings in there, we'll indicate that we're storing string, and it comes followed by that. We have the name of the array list. So we could have something like a member list. All right. And what we would do after, we're going to say array list string member list equal to new array list. And we just indicate the type of values that we're storing, string. All right, so the beauty about the array list is that it can store just about any data type, including what we would have defined in terms of our classes. Now, to use the array list, you need to import the java.util that array list. All right, that will take care of that for us. And just to also provide you with what the skeleton of the array list looks like. So this is what it really looks like. So when we are defining an array list, you start off with the keyword array list, followed by the object, It's a type of object that you're using. Then the name of the array list equal to new array list. Then we have the object type. All right. So this is a basic syntax that we use. So if we are defining an array list to store integers, all you're going to do is replace string with the wrapper class. That's a wrapper for int, which is integer. If you're going to store double, you'd replace it with double and so forth and so on. So for this, if we define the array list, as I mentioned earlier, there is no limit in terms of the amount of members that we can store. So if we want to store 10 members or 5 members, it doesn't matter. So all we would say, in order to store an element in the array list, we specify the name of the array list, like member list. So the member list that add, all right, so there are a number of methods that we can invoke on the array list. All right, so to put an element in the array list, we're going to use the add. All right, so we're going to say that add. So if we add, say, Adrian. Want to add another one, we just say member list. That add. All right, you can say member list. That add. And so on. So you can add any amount. Earlier on, the member array that we created up here could only store 3 persons. This list can store any amount. So if you want to store 4 persons, this is fine. All right. So it will work with any amount that we want to store. Since it's a string, we'll surround it by a double quote. All right. So that is an array list of string. If you want to define an array list now to store probably some person's age, maybe this could be a of type integer, you just say array list. And any data type we want to store. So if it's int, we can use the primitive int. What we have to do is use the wrapper class, because as I would have indicated to you here in the syntax, the array list takes in an object in the Angular bracket. All right, so if we have like an age list equal to new array list. So if we try to use int, you'll notice what will happen. All right, so it's going to complain. All right, so it says unexpected type. So what we have to do, we have to put in a reference, which is we have to put in an object type. So the object type for int is the integer, which is referred to as a wrapper class for integer. All right, so anytime an integer object is required, we're going to use integer, which is the wrapper class. All right, so the wrapper class integer allows you to treat with integer as if they are actually objects. All right. And similarly to how we add the names here, we can add different age to the array list here. So we could say age list that add on the other age of 12, age list that add 98, doesn't matter. So age list. Right, so we could go on and on and add the different ages that we want to add. Now, another thing that the array list can do, so if you have a user-defined class, for example, here we have an item class. Just like how we can add have an array list of strings, we can have an array list of integers. Here we have a class called item. We could also have an array list of item. So it's no different. So we would define it by stating the keyword array list followed by the object type. The object type in this case would be item. then the name of the array list, and so forth. So you'd simply say array list, and then we have what would be the object type in this case?
Item.
Very good. So it put item here, item, and we can just call it item list equal to new array list of type item. All right, so that's how we go about creating an array list. And of course, the array list of item can store different item objects. So if we have different item objects to be stored, so for example, if we create an item object, for example, item 1, or the new item. Let's say we created that item object, just like how we store the age and the names in those other array lists. We could do the same thing here to store the item 1 in this array list. So we could just say item list that add, and we just put item 1. So that's how we create the array list. That's how we add the elements. And finally, printing elements from the array list. So if you want to print elements from the array list, now the array list items can be accessed just like how we access the array items. So the array items are stored at index starting at 0. Similarly, the first item in the array list is at index 0. So if I want to print out the first name that is entered in the members list, I can just say print line member list. All right, so you can say member list that there's a method called get. All right, so there's a method in here called get, and the get, to the get, you have to specify the index of what you want to print out. So if I say get 0, member list get 0, it will print out for me the first person, which is Adrian. If I say member list get 1, it will print out Kimala, which is the second one, all right? Because that's how they are arranged. So if I were to just compile this, all right, so here's our output. All right, so there's our output, all right? So the array list provides us a very nice way to store items of any size. Also, if we were to print out the entire list now, just like we did with the array, we could just set up a for loop to print out the entire list. So we could say, also, I should also indicate to you that if you want to see this amount of elements in the array list, you can just say the name of the array list followed by the size method. So you can just invoke the size method. So if I say member list that size will tell us how much elements are in the members list. In this case, we have 4. So if we were to run it, we will see 4. And this is very important if you're going to use a loop to print out the content of your array list. All right, so there it is. We have 4 elements. All right. And it therefore means that if we wish to print the content of the array list, we can just say something like for in count equal to 0, count less than the array list, that size, because size represents how much elements we have in the array list. So if the size is 4, so we're going to go from 0 to 3, since we say count less than 4. So the index would be 0, 1, 2, 3 for the 4 elements. And then just increment count. All right. And remember what we did when we were printing out the one item, we just do something similar. So when we're printing out a particular item, we say member list that get, and we would have specified a particular index. So we specified 0 for the first element. If you want to see the second element, we specify 1. All right, so since we are using the loop, what do you think would be the best thing to put inside of the get?
Count.
Very good, count. And once that is done, this will print out all the elements for us from the array list. So let's execute this and see the result. All right, so there it is. So that prints out all the elements for us. Also, if I want to print out the items, all right, so if I want to print out like the name and price of the items that I have added, you know, I could just set up a toString method that would just return those for us and print it the same way. So I could just say string public string toString. And remember, the toString method is called automatically if you are using the name of the object. So I'll show you that in a minute. So so here, this toString method will just return for us the item name, which is name. We'll put a little space and price. And you put a little $sign here to show that. All right. All right. So therefore, we know that if we're on here in store, if we try to print out item, so for example, if I say system.out.print, so if I want to print out the item now, that is print. All right, so if I want to print out a particular item, that is, if I want to say item 1, let's say I want to print this item object, because I create the toString method in item, it's going to print out name and price. All right. And similarly, if I want to access the items from the list, so if I want to access the first item that has been added to the list, I can just say item list that get 0, and it will print out the name and the price for us. That's because we have implemented the toString method. So it knows what to do when we're printing the actual object name. All right, so let me add one more item. So I'm going to create another item. All right, this item, I'm going to use the parameterized constructor, this one, which takes in a name and a price. So say item 2 equal to new item. Say it takes in a name, for example, carrot cake, and the price is $200. So my new item is carrot cake with a price of 200. I can add that to the list. I can say item list, that add item 2. So this is a new item, it has been added to the list. Again, if I want to print out all the items in the list, I'm gonna just do something similar to this. So I could just put that here, comment out this one that prints out one item. And this will print out all the items for me. So all I need to do is just change this from member list to item list. Item list, that size will get the size of, that means how much items have been added. And then I'm just going to output. So the item list, lowercase item, that get count. And that will print out for us the items and their prices. So here we go. So we compile. Right, so there it is. So it starts from the unknown, then the carrot cake. These were there before. But if you want to do a fresh compile again. All right, so that's the result. So that's how we use an array list. And if you have any questions,